Good afternoon. The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. My name is Janet Stavinga. I'm here today representing a coalition of 74 dedicated and concerned professionals who have given decades of service to guide and support local evidence-based watershed resource management. These professionals have come together in response to the province's proposed sweeping changes to our conservation authorities. Also joining us today is Ontario Nature, a conservation organization that was foundational to the creation of the conservation authorities in the 1940s. The National Farmers Union Ontario, representing thousands of farmers, and the Federation of Ontario Cottagers Associations, which exists to protect the interests of the Ontario's waterfront property owners. Together, we are urging our government to halt its ill-conceived plan to consolidate our conservation authorities. Again, the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. This quote from former U.S. President Ronald Reagan at an August 1986 news conference is especially fitting given our government's respect for other quotes from Reagan. By proposing the regional consolidation of our conservation authorities, our provincial government is not helping Ontarians. The government claims that CAs are inefficient and broken. They also claim that CAs are fragmented and inconsistent. The government's helpful solution is to bring a wrecking ball to the party, rather than fine-tuning a system that already works well. This proposal risks the safety of Ontarians by paving the way for development in floodplains and hazard lands. It further solidifies the government's power to override local decisions made by the conservation authorities to protect against flooding, erosion, and safeguard water quality and municipal drinking water for Ontarians. RCAs are also Ontario's second largest landowner. Extremely disconcerting that this proposal opens the door for our government to further pressure massive regional CAs to dispose of these lands for uses that were never intended. Following the announcement of the updated Conservation Authority Consolidation Plan on March 10th, Minister McCarthy stated in an interview on CFRB 1010 that the new proposal has, quote, the consensus from all stakeholders, the municipal leaders, conservation authority representatives who gave input to his ministry over the 40 days following the creation of the central agency late last year, end of quote. There is no consensus. Rather, based on our review of the comments submitted on this proposal, there's an exceptionally wide and diverse cross-section of Ontarians who are overwhelming 97.5% in opposition, and they urge caution on the CA proposal. This consensus is in fact opposition for moving forward on the proposed regional consolidation. This is a pattern that the Auditor General has flagged. Ontarians' right to participate meaningfully in environmental decision-making is being eroded, and in this case, ignored. So if the provincial government is here to help, truly help, then they must halt this process and go back to the drawing board and listen to Ontarians. Now, I'll pass it to Tony from Ontario Nature.
Thank you, Janet. To build off of what Janet has said, when the province announced the consolidation proposal, there was no consultation on whether regional consolidation was a good idea. They consulted on how it should be done, not whether it should be done. In the minister's updated announcement earlier this month, this proposed consolidation plan further undermines local decision-making. Lower-tier municipalities are now completely excluded from the governance of these massive, sprawling conservation authorities. The allegation that conservation authorities are fragmented ignores the unique nature of watersheds across the province. They differ in hydrology, geology, land uses, and each have distinct challenges requiring different approaches. This is much the same way that municipalities vary in their decision-making. Since 2020, this government has routinely undermined the mandate and role of conservation authorities, with this latest proposal further eroding their independence and expertise. Most striking is the creation of a new provincial agency, which actually introduces more bureaucracy. Out of the Walkerton inquiry, Justice O'Connor recommended that the provincial government accept the watershed as they are currently defined for the purposes of establishing the jurisdiction of the conservation authorities. The province has not addressed the implications of this proposed consolidation on source protection regions and plans, putting our municipal drinking water at risk. As Janet mentioned, conservation authorities are also the second largest landowner in the province, stewarding over 150,000 hectares of natural areas and floodplains, close to where the majority of Ontarians live. Over 10 million Ontarians visit their conservation areas each year, contributing to local economies. Yet in 2022, the province, as part of Bill 23, mandated conservation authorities to provide an inventory of their lands and identify whether those lands are suitable for housing and infrastructure. With this regional consolidation and provincial control, and despite assurances from the province, it remains unclear whether these areas will continue to be safeguarded as intended. We need only remember the Greenbelt scandal. I'll now turn it over to Claire, representing the National Farmers Union of Ontario.
Thanks, Tony. The Conservation Authorities Act of 1946 was established in response to widespread flooding, drought, erosion, poor water quality, and deforestation problems. The key principle guiding their formation was the management of natural resources on a watershed basis, rather than by political or municipal boundaries. Consolidating these evidence-based conservation authority zones from 36 to 9 will severely undermine the original mandate of the Act, putting farmers and citizens at risk. The sweeping powers that are being proposed will override local voices in conservation decision-making, diminishing the crucial support farmers need to advance on-farm conservation initiatives. CAs are partners with farmers, working to advance on-farm conservation initiatives that improve soil health, water quality, reduce erosion, protect wetlands and at-risk or endangered species, support sustainable woodlot management, provide risk reduction for rural properties with flooding or droughts, and so much more. As ecological features like watersheds, riparian zones, and forest connectivity vary greatly geographically, localized conservation authorities are essential to farmers and climate resiliency efforts that impact us all. Here are a few quotes from our agricultural community on this proposed consolidation. From a farmer in Eastern Ontario, decisions related to flooding, drainage, and land use are not abstract. They affect my farm, my livelihood, and my community. These decisions rely on a stronger understanding of local conditions, which would be lost in much larger consolidated jurisdictions. From a farmer on the Grand River, these local experts provide farmers with science-based, accurate, local information on a daily basis. These rural water programs are effectively run and managed at the local level, and we will lose this by consolidating larger regional areas. And from the National Farmers Union representing London Middlesex, conservation authorities provide economic value to rural communities by protecting them from floods. The July 2024 flash floods in Toronto caused $1 billion in insured losses. Local knowledge of floodplains and infrastructure, as currently available with the 36 conservation authorities, can help prevent these increasingly likely losses and damages. Again, these sweeping changes to our conservation authorities, as proposed by our government, will threaten not just the livelihoods and conservation efforts of farmers, but Ontarians as a whole. Now, Donna from the Federation of Ontario Cottagers Associations will provide a few remarks.
Thank you. Our 587 members are lake and road associations located all over the province. This translates to 50,000 cottagers and their families. Many lakes, rivers, and Great Lakes shorelines where Ontarians cottage have a local conservation authority. The lake associations in particular work hard at protecting their local environment, whether it is by water testing or ground projects such as invasive species removal or shoreline restoration. Conservation authorities operate at the scale that works with local landowners and local municipalities. They know the local conditions and who is doing what. They make connections with other similar organizations to ensure good outcomes on the ground. Our members benefit from and value the knowledge of the staff and programs of their local CA because there's no one else left on the ground to rely on. Consolidation is bound to weaken those local connections, and with it, the ability to support these associations, which at times are fighting against the tide of change. Take, for example, the proposed Eastern Lake Ontario Conservation Authority, which amalgamates 7 conservation authorities into one region of 28,000 square kilometers. If even one service is centralized, it makes it impossible for landowners to become engaged. And why does that matter? Cottagers are important to the local economy, and the environment is the economy for this sector. In a study FOCA commissioned in 2021, the total estimated annual waterfront property household spending in Ontario was $11.4 billion, of which 78% is in community and 22% is beyond. This spending contributes to a generation of 157,000 plus total jobs in Ontario. And of these jobs, 86% are generated in the community. Healthy lakes and watersheds sustain vibrant communities, support tourism and recreation economies, and protect the municipal tax base that waterfront properties contribute to all across Ontario. Now back to Janet from the Watershed Conservation Coalition.
Thanks very much, Donna. So we were originally going to end here, but certain events happened this week that led for an opportunity to rise. As recently as Monday, we had a delegation of our coalition had a meeting with senior representatives from the Minister's office, Minister McCarthy's office. It was a conversation, 30 minutes in duration, and what became very evident during that conversation is a sense that municipalities are okay with this consolidation. That's just a matter of how is it done? It just needs to be done slow. You need to talk to us about it. Clearly, that is not what we have been hearing as a coalition. Interesting enough, as recently as that evening, I had received a note from a city councillor or a councillor of the town of Amherstburg and also a chair of the Essex Region Conservation Region to talk about this. And clearly, it is a municipal and a CA perspective that there is no consensus and that there is great opposition to it. So I asked if she could attend today, and I'm delighted to introduce to you a new member of our growing coalition, Molly Allard, from, again, a councillor from Amherstburg, as well as the chair of the Essex Region Conservation Region Authority. Thank you.
Over the past several months, we have actively advocated for the future of conservation authorities. Since the proposed amalgamation was announced, IRCA, our member municipalities, have submitted formal letters, delegated to the Minister of Environment at Roma, and met the Assistant Minister to provide practical, constructive recommendations. We have strong unified support from all 9 municipalities in our watershed, urban and rural, as well as key industry community partners, the Heavy Construction Association, Windsor-Essex Home Builders Association, Invest Windsor-Essex, the Ontario Greenhouse Vegetable Growers, and many more. This message is consistent. Modernization is needed, but it must be done thoughtfully in a way that preserves local expertise and avoids unintended consequences. As a farmer, I understand firsthand that we live in a low-lying floodplain bordered by 3 major water bodies. In just 3 years, we've seen separate 1 in 100-year storm events. These risks are not theoretical. They're real, they're immediate, and they're increasing. Conservation authorities exist to prevent unsafe development and protect people and property. Weakening watershed-based planning with massive amalgamation into just 9 regional conservation authorities ignores environmental realities and decades of hard-earned lessons. What's most concerning is the speed at which this proposal is being rammed through, with a target date that's just months away without a meaningful consultation or discussion with those who have been leading the way for decades. If the goal is efficiency, work with us. identify the gaps, set standards, streamline processes, and most importantly, consult meaningfully with those who understand these systems: municipal leaders, conservation professionals, agriculture representatives, developers, engineers, and industry experts. We have followed every guideline. We have submitted to the Environmental Registry. We have engaged, delegated, and gathered broad support. As a taxpayer, municipal leader, and the chair of a high-performing locally supported conservation authority, I expect to get better. The government has long claimed for fiscal discipline and common sense decision making. This proposal meets neither standard. I am asking to take some time to consult meaningfully with the appropriate representatives. The environment does not bend to government timelines. Watersheds operate on science, not political boundaries. Our responsibility is to not control nature, but to steward it with care. The sound decision-making that Ontario conservation authorities have been doing for 80 years. And I will be turning it back to Janet for closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Laird. Our province has been underfunding in the conservation authorities for decades. Under Mike Harris, provincial funding to our conservation authority programs was slashed by $50 million per year to $8 million. Then, in 2019, the current provincial government cut flood management funding by 50%. Municipalities have had to fill the gap. CAs operate 900 dams, dikes, channels, and other erosion control structures along rivers and shorelines, evaluated at $3.8 billion in 2009 dollars. The cost to maintain this infrastructure is sorely underfunded by the province. Flooding is already the most costly disaster in Ontario, and the conservation authorities have regularly advocated for greater provincial investments. This proposed consolidation does not address this fiscal imbalance, nor does it accurately depict the true transition costs. There's also no evidence that CAs hinder housing construction. In fact, the report of the Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force in 2022 does not mention CAs in any of its 55 actionable and concrete recommendations to improve housing access. In fact, CAs aren't mentioned at all. The 2025 Ontario Municipal Chief Planner Survey also tells us that persistent changes to planning legislation and governance will slow down, not speed up, planning approvals. In 2024, conservation authorities granted 96% of the permits within their required timelines. The province's rationale for this consolidation does not hold up to scrutiny when reviewing the facts. Again, they've not provided a business case for such a drastic overhaul. There are too many unanswered questions with this proposal and too many risks. If the government is here to help, truly help, then they must halt this process and go back to the drawing board and listen to Ontarians. Let's work collaboratively with our municipalities, our conservation authorities, our First Nations, and those who have given decades of service to guide and support our local evidence-based watershed resource management. Modernizing services and improving coordination does not require disrupting the current structure of our local conservation authorities when you consider the risks and the costs that we have outlined. I will close with one final comment from a concerned Ontarian cited in the ERO. Quote, "The current system is more like a carefully assembled watershed puzzle than a scattered collection of unrelated pieces. Taking that puzzle apart, tossing the pieces into the air, and hoping they land in a better arrangement is not a responsible way to manage water, land, and our communities." End of quote. The same is true for dismantling watershed-based conservation authorities and assuming a new, larger structure will somehow produce a better outcome. Thoughtful, locally informed refinement of the existing system would serve Ontarians far better than a disruptive, top-down consolidation that risks weakening the very protections people and our ecosystems now rely upon. Thank you, and thank you for joining us today.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, I got a few. But before I get into anything specific, I don't know if you guys were in the public gallery for question period today or not.
We were.
Conservation authorities did come up, and I was hoping you could respond to some things that Minister McCarthy said, and I'll read them out here. We've received consensus for the amalgamation and the strengthening of conservation authorities into 9 watershed regional conservation authorities. We will better equip them equally and with updated mapping and the best technology to fill their core mandate of flood prevention, of protecting people and property from natural hazards, and strong watershed management. What's wrong with that? That sounds like a pretty good thing. Is that not what they're doing?
Well, you need to take it apart. First, they're not respecting watershed boundaries. What's really interesting, and a perfect example, a really strong illustration, maybe I'll step back a bit. When they announced from 7 to 9, and they put Northwestern Region Conservation Authority, they separated it, because originally that was done linked to Huron. The province and the government does not get a passing grade for making that change. The fact that they even proposed that proposed that structure in the first place is ludicrous and shows their absence of understanding about integrated watershed management. That's the first point. Second point is there's still not a respect to watershed management. When you look to the Northeastern Regional Conservation Authority, Matagami Region Conservation Area is the largest conservation authority that we have in Ontario. It's 11,000 square kilometers. That does not feed into Lake Superior. It does not feed into Ottawa River. It does not feed into Lake Huron. It feeds into the Arctic Basin. And yet it is grouped with watershed conservation authorities who are feeding to Lake Superior and Lake Huron. So again, the government is not understanding watershed management. The second thing is they are not investing in conservation authorities. The $20 million is a startup for their central organization, which, by the way, is not the first organization that Ontario had. We had the Conservation Authorities branch that was established in the 40s when the Act was put in place. So when the minister on the 10th of March indicated that this is the first ever organization, he needs to go back to his history books. And that agency was well funded and well resourced and supported the development of conservation authorities across Ontario. The transition costs that he speaks about, the $3 million that will help with transition costs, and then afterwards we'll be able to actually improve the conservation authorities and the program delivery. Well, we call them on that one too. Because when we look at transition costs, historically, again, in amalgamations for municipalities, specifically, we can look at Ottawa, where I was the mayor before the amalgamation, and then Ottawa City Councillor. Within the first month and a half that Ottawa was amalgamated, the government of Ontario, under Harris, had to cut a check of $108 million to cover the transition costs. They had to cut another check of $31 million to Hamilton for their amalgamation. So to think that $3 million will cover that cost is absolutely preposterous. So they are dissembling something that works well. If they really want to invest in conservation authorities, they need to come back to the table. They need to equalize the funding formula because, again, it still stands that municipalities will be covering the load. Plus, they actually have to pay something to the new central agency as well. So I'm sorry, Minister McCarthy, but you need to come back to the table again because it's not serving conservation authorities well, and there's no consensus when you have 97.5% of the people who registered through the ERO, their comments are saying, we don't support this.
So you've mentioned a couple times about this land inventory and the fact that conservation authorities have so much land. What is the concern here that you think that they're going to establish this new agency as in a way to sell off this land to develop for land development? Is that what you think is motivating this?
It's not motivating. It's very clear. They've played their cards already. Mm-hmm. They put that in Bill 23 that they have to identify those surplus lands. But then they also did a follow-up regulation in 2025, made it very clear, Section 8 in that particular regulation, that cites they need to do an inventory and they need to identify what lands are available or possible for housing and housing infrastructure. So they've done that already. And one conservation authority, the Grand River, actually declared something surplus. The city of Guelph was quite alarmed, as many people in Guelph as well as across Ontario, and that municipality ended up acquiring that land to protect that one. So there is a concern about that. There is, we talk about a hidden agenda, and certainly it's quite, well, I say the agenda is not so hidden because they've already laid their cards on the table as to what they would like conservation authorities to do with their land. And frankly, when you become a regional entity, at one point, it may not be the first year, it may not be the second year, but I can tell you again, when we look at lessons of amalgamations across this province, there is a rationalization of assets. What can we no longer afford to keep? And of course, things are then declared surplus. And again, municipalities, you just have to look to that municipal amalgamation in 2000, and you can see that panning out. Might not be in the first year or 2 or 5 years, but it certainly happens.
I'm going to ask Molly if you could tell. It was sort of mentioned that there's no consensus going on with municipalities of whether this is like a good thing or a bad thing. Can you give us a bit of an idea of what is going on discussion-wise between municipalities on this subject?
So what I can say is we have not met as a board yet. Our next board meeting is April 13th. So since the March 10th announcement, I can't make any assumptions on other municipalities. I myself, hearing from some members that are on the board, they raised concerns. Concerns with, well, what does this still mean? How is this going to work? To be honest, we haven't gotten many answers. And the real issue with IRCA is all those things that the minister just stated that he's going to do and empower conservation authorities. We're already doing it. We have online digital platforming. We have updated mapping. So we have been able to do that, and the province hasn't needed to help us. So, well, in respect, obviously. So it's just frustrating, I think, from us and a standpoint. We're doing it.
Which board are you?
Essex Region Conservation Authority.
I think, can Claire or Donna, you guys are representing two constituencies that the PC government does really value. From where I was standing, it seemed like opposition from farmers was one of the things that got them to reverse course on the Greenbelt. I'm wondering, I don't know if one or both of you wants to speak to this, but like, how much of your constituents are cottagers or farmers, are they really like invested in this issue, or is there going to be a big like pushback from farmers like there was on the Greenbelt, or is this really just a minor issue for your group, the people you represent? Can you give us an idea of where people stand?
Sure. Issues of flooding and climate mitigation strategies on farms are a constant issue. We've had really unsteady weather for the last couple of years. Farmers are seeing all kinds of impacts, extreme weather. Someone mentioned 1 in 100 year floods, 3 in the last couple of years. So obviously not 1 in 100. And those are big issues for farmers. That directly impacts livelihoods. And the conservation authorities have a role in assisting farmers with those challenges, with mitigating those issues. So if those conservation authorities are cut down, that is a big issue for farmers and their livelihoods for sure.
Farmers like calling like their PC MPPs? Are they like ready to like vote differently? Are they ready to like abandon the PC party if like this doesn't happen? How angry are people about this?
Sure. I mean, you heard the 3 quotes on we had just 3 farmer quotes selected today, but many more farmers than 3 put forward their complaints and their issues with this proposal. So I can't speak to everyone's voting patterns, but I think people are raising the alarm for sure.
I don't know. Like, people love their cottages, and like
they love their cottages.
I know the premier has a very nice cottage as well.
Yes, in a very nice area.
How big an issue is this for the people you represent?
I'm going to speak specifically about my lake, if that's okay, because that's kind of what FOCA represents, all of us together. On our lake, we're at the top of the chain of a group of lakes that flow into the Ottawa River. and it's all controlled by dams. So, in the spring, how much water do we still let out of our lake? Because anything that happens with our lake impacts down below. That conservation area looks after that. They have all the knowledge, they have all the science behind them to know exactly how to regulate those logs. And they do it every year. If they aren't around, I don't know who's going to take care of that. And that really worries me, because you need to have that science, you need to have those expertise making those decisions as to how many logs to put in or take out. And I do worry about that. I think the information, the interest groups that are all the conservation authorities provide to all the cottagers and FOCA is invaluable, because again, they have the science. They're doing the investigation. They're keeping all that in touch. If we lose that conservation area, it's going to be amalgamated. I think we've lost our voice.
I think we're out of time.
Good.
So,
So, thank you very much. I can tell you, though, that we took the time to review, as I said, every comment in the ERO. And it was really interesting. There were some very stated comments that said, I have been part of the Ford Nation, and if this goes through, I will never be part of it again. And that was not just one comment, but many. So there is recognition within the Conservative base that this is not something that they support. So again, I'd like to express our thanks to all of you who have been watching, who are here today, the questions that have been asked. And we ask you to, again, contact your MPP, contact your Premier, let them know that you care about our conservation authorities and that you care about Ontario. Thank you.